to this, and yes, it is another question and answer, believe it or not. I told you I'd be doing more of these. So here we are, as always. I'm going to put myself again. Please, 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 click on the ads. It will help out a lot. Thank you. Anyways, so yeah, here we are with some more questions and answers. I got quite a few today, which is kind of surprising. I didn't know, but so we'll go through the ones that I liked. Again, you know, you got a question, send it, no matter how lame you think it is. I might like to answer it. There's a lot of basic stuff, and I do like answering basic questions sometimes. It's just sometimes there's stuff that I've been over 100 times that I don't feel like answering again. Other than that, all I say is keep it to one question and try to keep it as short as possible. I know that's sometimes a lot easier said than done. I understand that. Sometimes the question's just going to be long just because of the nature of it. And I do understand that, but even though, like the last video, this video is going to have a lot of long questions, it's basically because those were the best ones. I didn't have a lot, and I did want to do one tonight. Probably the next video I'm going to do, just so everybody knows, is probably going to be another MMA video. I'm going to do another little rant on an issue that is not just MMA related, but also related to boxing to an extent as well. So for all of you that don't like my MMA rants, well, you're going to get another one anyways. So let's get started right now with some questions, and I will do my best to answer them. So let's get started. Who do you think was a better ROH champion, Samoa Joe or Bryan Danielson? Bryan Danielson was a great ROH champion. However, Samoa Joe as champion pretty much put that company on the map to the point that even when he wasn't champion, everyone thought he should have been champion, but he was seen as bigger than the belt. So I would definitely say Samoa Joe. That, and I'm more of a Joe mark myself, so there we go with that. Let's see, I'm not a real ROH fan, but I have seen the CM Punk vs. Samoa Joe matches. Do you think those two will ever have a feud in WWE or TNA, and do you have a preference as to what company they meet in? It is very possible. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't meet in somewhere else down the line. Is it going to happen? I don't know, because, you know, I definitely don't see Punk leaving WWE anytime soon, and apparently Joe's got a pretty lengthy contract, so it would be fought way down the line. But if I had my preference, I would say WWE, because I think that those two in a match is WrestleMania worthy. That's just me, but to be honest, I really don't care as long as they were able to wrestle each other again, because they do have very good chemistry with each other. So there we go. Let's see. Do you think the fact that Pro Wrestling Noah is pretty much just All Japan 2002 affects the way that Puro fans around the world see its impact in today's scene? I would have said that, except for all the info we got from the UK shows. Those shows apparently went over very big, and I think showed that they're still Noah to a great degree. So no, but I definitely can see where they're going. I don't necessarily agree with the way they're going, but I think in a lot of ways Noah's just, I can see what they're trying to do. I just don't think they know how to do it. I think they're trying to be a little more entertainment oriented in some facets of it. And sometimes it comes off really good, and sometimes it comes off kind of just blah. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that they try to do that just doesn't come off very well. I wish that they would really commit to some of the younger guys and see that they have a possibility of putting on really great undercards, particularly with the fact that they do work pretty well, apparently, with Dragon Gate. So take that for what it is. But I would say no as to the question, because after, you know, seeing the reaction they got in the UK, I think that pretty much says that. Here's a question for you, sir. For those of you who don't know, ROH's 200th show is coming up in September. The way that the schedule was working out, it looked as if the show would be September 20th at the new Alhambra Arena. But a couple of weeks ago, ROH announced 2 shows in Japan on the 13th and 14th, meaning the 200th show will take place in Japan. How do you feel about a fairly monumental show in ROH's history taking place outside of the country and not in Philly, where ROH was born? The fact that it's in Japan helps a lot, because those, for whatever reason, the 2 shows they did in Japan, even though I didn't think they were great shows, and that wasn't necessarily ROH's fault, due to the fact that there was some stuff that went down that kind of hurt the shows as far as injuries and stuff. But would I like it to be in Philly? Yes, I think that would be fitting. And however, if it's in Japan, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It being in Japan, because I think you can say, look, we just had a 200th show. It's in Tokyo, Japan. Tokyo, Japan is still Tokyo, Japan for pro wrestling. So to that extent, I don't have a problem with it. However, I do understand that, you know, I would like it because I do believe in symmetry. I do think that there are certain things that should be done in certain cities, certain buildings, certain events that should be held in certain buildings, and this would be one of those. I do think that that would be fitting, but, well, I guess we will see, I guess. Do you think TNA made a mistake by letting go of the Sinister Minister? He was one of their best mic guys, I think, and at the time, with all silicone-filled managers, and it's refreshing to see a male manager in the mainstream. Do you think he will resurface in WWE, ROH, or just retire? I would be shocked if he didn't show up in ROH. He could show up in WWE, but WWE, I don't think would use him because they're not really big on managers at the moment. You know, they didn't really have anything for him to do in TNA at the moment, so I do understand them getting rid of him. I'm kind of sad to see it go because I did like him, and I did think he fit a role that they needed. So to that extent, I'm kind of sad to see him go, but I wouldn't be shocked if he showed up in ROH, to be honest. I would be more shocked if he didn't show up in ROH. How's that? I think that Shawn Michaels is the best wrestler of all time. When it comes to wrestling ability, mic work, charisma, there's no one that can touch RTPO. I just wondered your thoughts on where you would rank him all time next to guys like Flair, Hogan, Austin. I'll say this. To me, he's not top 5, only because, to me, when you're talking about all of pro wrestling, Shawn Michaels' biggest drawback is the fact that while he was a very, very good draw, he was not a great draw. However, he's great. Everything else is great. He is pretty much, I would say, the closest thing we ever saw to Ric Flair, but still not to that level of Ric Flair. And I wouldn't even put Ric Flair as maybe the greatest wrestler of all time. So, you know, I can't put him there. I put him in the top 10, definitely. I don't even know if I put him in the top 5, because you have Hogan, who definitely would be there just because of drawing ability, and you can't deny that fact. And there's other guys that are very similar to that around the world. So, you know, I don't agree, but to each their own. So, there we go. Do you think a big part of UFC's success came as a result of the end of the Attitude Era in wrestling? Both wrestling and MMA share the same age gender demographic, which is dominated by WCW and WWF. During the Monday Night Wars, wrestling lost a hold around 2000-2002, and since then the UFC has exploded. I would agree with that. I think part of it has to do is wrestling stopped being the hip thing, particularly after the Monday Night Wars, because the Monday Night Wars was kind of a hip thing within, you know, the age demographic and all of that. I also think UFC did a better job of kind of having guys that people wanted to see, people that people were intrigued by. And even though, you know, Pride wasn't necessarily a big competitor with UFC, I think the fact that UFC did see them as some kind of a threat, and you did have them knowing that, hey, we got to put on big shows. That whole competition thing is a big thing, and I think it forced them to do things that probably they're not doing now, and that made them popular during that time. Also, MMA just kind of exploded in general at the time, and it always kind of saw that happening, particularly with boxing continually just letting the fans down. So there you go with that. There's a whole reason, I would say, but I definitely think that part of it is that, but I also think part of it is now MMA is kind of the hip thing. And at that time, wrestling was kind of the hip thing, and that's not something that you can necessarily focus your product about. Either you are or you aren't. And the WWE was beneficial, and so was pro wrestling to that effect, and now MMA is. And the real is, what do you do when you're not the hip thing? That's always the big question, because you're not always going to stay the hip thing. It just doesn't happen that way. As we all know, WWE quality of programming is diminished by its crowd priorities. Basically, they want to please kids rather than tend to the hardcore wrestling fan. People defend John Cena and his gimmick, saying that as long as he's making money and entertaining children, that's fine. I'm not bashing John Cena in this question, but he is a prime example. How come they are catering to young audiences when the actual pay-per-views and DVDs are intended for 15 and above? So to me, it seems like it's a whole waste of time and should actually wake up and concentrate on the second initial of their name. Here's the problem with that. That they are still, because and the numbers have shown this, I've seen the numbers that show this, that John Cena is popular not just with young kids. That is a huge misconception. He's also popular with everybody from 13 to 16 as well. You also have the women demographic when you get higher than that. But he's big in that portion, and also the WWE is very big in that portion when it comes to that. When people talk about, when insiders talk about them catering towards children, they're talking about people 16 and under, not just people 12 and under. They're talking about that whole, everybody under that. And that's who they cater to. That's who their DVDs cater to. You definitely see that, on one hand, you see them catering to, kids with the action figures and the play toys and all of that, but then, they target teenagers too with the video games and that sort of thing. Their stuff is generated towards that. They don't focus their product because they don't see that as a money-driving product of anybody probably over the age of 18. Also, 16 and under, for the most part, you're still, people are still those individuals still relying on their parents' money, not their own money, and so they're basing it on, they're going to go to mommy and daddy and say, mommy and daddy, I want this DVD, unlike me, who I can't do that. So that's something to keep in mind, and it's how they're making money. It's why they're making as much money as they are right now, along with their international pay-per-view sales. So it's working. So I would agree that I don't think the product is great right now, but I do think that you can market to those individuals and still make the product somewhat better, similar to what we've seen, I think, the last 2 weeks on Raw, which I think the last 2 weeks of Raw have been very good as a whole. So there we go with that. What is one promo that completely moved you to the point where you would do anything to see the end of that feud or the match that followed that promo? Well, there are two. And the first one leads kind of in a way to the second one. The first one was when Kurt Hennig was brought into the Horsemen. At that point in time, I wasn't really looking forward to the whole Four Horsemen NWO thing because I thought that they did a bad job of building it up, and they didn't build it up the way I think they should have, and all of that, and I just wasn't into it. But then he came in, they did the great promo, and I wanted to see that War Games. To my horror later on. The next one was when Ric Flair came back, and even though there wasn't necessarily going to be a match after that, we all thought maybe we would see things differently, that we would see, WCW let Ric Flair go in and, get over on some of the guys that a lot of us saw as the reason why Ric Flair had been, away from WCW. But when he came back on that Nitro, people have heard me talk about this before. That was just a magical night, which is just amazing. And I would say that because I wanted to see where they were going to go with it, so I would say both of those. Would you please explain the difference between a fan of a wrestler and a mark of a wrestler? There is no difference, though I'm sure a lot of people will come on here and say, yes, there is a difference. There is a huge difference. There is no difference. If you are a fan of a wrestler, you are a mark of a wrestler. If you are a fan of wrestling, you are a mark for pro wrestling. Every person that is a fan of pro wrestling is a mark. Get used to it. That's the way it is. Thank you. I'm done. If Bryan Danielson does jump ship to WWE, what would you think of him and CM Punk feuding on Raw over the World Heavyweight Championship? Would not happen. Would never happen in a million years. Mainly because WWE is not going to push Bryan Danielson that fast. Even if they brought him in, he would go to Florida, probably at least for a couple months, then come into ECW, and then would have to work his way up. That's the way WWE has always done it, and he would be no different. Even though, you know, I'm sure Shawn Michaels would be, you know, in people's ears that he should get maybe a little faster push, but it wouldn't happen. Hey, T-Slay, love your vids. I was wondering if you think WWE will ever do a War Games. Get asked this a couple times. I like answering this question because I love War Games. Apparently, Triple H is very big on War Games, and he wants to be in a War Games match. However, Vince is not big on War Games, one reason being that he didn't invent it, so he doesn't want to do it, and the other one being the more practical reason that War Games, of course, takes up 2 rings to do it right. And it during the pay-per-view, it does look, if you've ever seen any of those pay-per-views, it does look a little odd seeing both rings. It also takes up seat space, which is the big reason. I know a lot of people will be like, it's only a few seats. Yeah, it's only a few seats, but it's a few high-dollar seats. So that's the other reason, is because of the seats, because it's the space it takes to take on. Though Triple H has been championing it for a while, so I wouldn't be too surprised if somewhere down the line we do eventually see a War Games match. I'm done. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Like I said, I won't be doing one of these tomorrow, but I will be doing a video on MMA tomorrow. So if you guys don't like MMA, you guys get, you know, the little notifications that I put on a new vid, just skip it. That's all I'm going to tell you. I'm out.